It's not often stories like this come along in Formula 1. A safety car in a crash leads to a red flag, confusion for the leaders, disaster for the champions, and suddenly an unlikely pair of contenders charge to the front. The 2020 Italian Grand Prix was part of the reason I watch Formula 1, the unpredictability, the madness, and the passion. So when I watched Pierre Gasly win his first ever Grand Prix, I cheered with millions of others. It may come as a surprise, as I'm not exactly Pierre's biggest fan, but he and the team at AlphaTauri pulled off a phenomenal race. It's been 2,730 days, 7 years, 5 months and 20 days, since a car other than a Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull won a race, and on the podium of the 2020 Italian Grand Prix, our wait was finally over. Gasly leapt onto the top step, and as he raised the trophy, there wasn't a dry eye in the AlphaTauri team. The first French winner of a Grand Prix since Monaco 1996 and Olivier Panis. It couldn't have happened at a better time. To see Gasly, after all the pain and heartbreak of the last couple of years, win a Formula 1 race and achieve the dream of a lifetime, it was incredible to watch, even for someone who's not exactly his biggest fan. His demotion from Red Bull in August 2019 after what was deemed underwhelming results was one of the 2019 season's biggest talking points, and scoring a podium in Brazil that year seemed to show Red Bull just how poorly they judged him. But after a series of strong results this year, for what is essentially the Red Bull B team, the victory in front of the crowds in Italy truly completes the fairy tale redemption of the last year, and I honestly couldn't be happier for him. Carlos Sainz Jr. was on the second step of the podium, having missed victory by just 0.415 seconds after rising from P6 on the restart. The battle between him and Gasly was fantastic to watch in the final laps. Gasly in the slower AlphaTauri holding off Sainz's charging McLaren, and while the result was ultimately not in Carlos's favour, the pace and dedication he showed to chop a 1.4 second lead to less than half a second in 2 laps was extremely skillful, and he took a very deserved second podium of his Formula 1 career. Plus, he actually got to stand on the podium this time. Lance Stroll finished third for Racing Point, and for me, this is the result that cemented Lance's place in Formula 1. At the end of 2019, many believed Lance was nothing more than a pay driver, kept in the Racing Point team solely because of his father's financial role. But today, he well and truly delivered. Strong results all season have put him in 4th place in the championship, and 3rd here in Italy was the perfect cherry on top of a fantastic season so far for Lance. After the race restart on lap 28, he worked his way up from 5th and drove a great podium finishing race for the Racing Point team. Lando Norris was 4th for McLaren, a welcome result and what many believe is a brilliant season for the 20-year-old. McLaren's having its best season in years, and Lando is a large part of their meteoric success. Valtteri Bottas, however, was 5th for Mercedes in a dismal performance. In the season's most dominant car, Bottas was seemingly nowhere during the race. His sole win of the year in Austria seems further away than ever, and he'll really need to clamp down in the next few races to prove the doubters wrong. Daniel Ricciardo was 6th, another strong performance for Renault. Renault have been mired in the midfield for a couple of years now, but 2020 really looks to be their breakout season, with Ricciardo at the forefront. The Australian qualified 7th, fell to 10th by the time the race restarted on lap 27, and took advantage of the chaotic racing to finish 6th, a solid haul of points for Renault. They'll be sad to see Daniel go to McLaren next year, that's for sure. Lewis Hamilton was 7th for Mercedes. The defending 6-time world champion looked dominant as ever in qualifying, and a mistake from the graphics team showed what we all thought was imminent, his 90th career race win. However, in the confusion over the race being red flagged, Hamilton went into the pit lane while it was deemed closed and received a 10-second stop-and-go penalty. He rejoined stone dead last, 23 seconds behind the pack, and in a true test of Mercedes' dominance, he tore through the field and finished 7th, setting the fastest lap. But it was ultimately a chink in Hamilton's seemingly bulletproof armour. Esteban Ocon was easily the most disappointed by the race result. Going from P12 to P8 may not have seemed too bad to some, but Esteban was clearly none too pleased. There was a tense moment on Renault team radio as he felt the race had been a missed opportunity, before being told by Renault team principal that this isn't the place for that discussion. Whatever that was all about was anyone's guess. However, Renault are turning to Alpine for the 2021 season as announced at the Italian Grand Prix, and that kind of negative press on public team radio is never going to be something that you want your driver to be saying. Daniil Kvyat finished 9th for AlphaTauri. He'd actually been running ahead of Gasly in the first stint, and Pierre pitting first meant that Daniil's strategy was lost in the confusion. For a driver desperately needing to impress this season, 9th place was just another dull blow to Kvyat's confidence, with his future in Formula 1 still in doubt. Sergio Perez had a good start to the race. An early battle with Norris, Ricciardo and Bottas seemed to build confidence. However, a botched pit stop under the safety car meant that he had to work his way back up on the grid in the restart and only finished 10th, a far cry from his teammates' podium. Outside the points, Nicholas Latifi finished 11th, with a nearly 10-second gap to Perez in 10th. A good finish relatively for the struggling team, and an emotional farewell to Claire Williams as she finished the Williams family's involvement in Formula 1. The Williams family are such a huge part of Formula 1, and their exit from the paddock leaves Williams to an uncertain future. Romain Grosjean finished 12th, as the unreliability of the Haas car continues to ruin his 2020 season. Kimi Raikkonen and George Russell crossed the line barely 0.2 of a second apart, Kimi having gradually slipped out of the points in the uncompetitive Alfa Romeo, while George had a bit of a nowhere race after starting 19th on the grid. Alex Albon finished 15th, a very poor result in an uncertain season. A 5-second penalty and a damaged car meant that he struggled to overtake a Williams, and capped off Red Bull's worst result since Baku 2018. Antonio Giovinazzi finished nearly a minute behind the winner as the last qualified finisher. A stop-go penalty identical to Hamilton's put him too far back on the grid, and coupled with the lackluster performance of this season's Alfa Romeo, it was a recipe for disaster. Giovinazzi has been failing to get the results needed in his short tenure in F1, and with Ferrari Academy drivers soaring up through the feeder series ranks, Giovinazzi's fledgling F1 career may well be nipped in the bud. Of the retirement, Kevin Magnussen's Haas was the catalyst for the chaos of the race. On lap 20, a suspected power units issue caused his Haas to retire. Parked on the grass verge, a safety car was quickly called out, and the pit lane was closed. Magnussen adds another DNF to his disappointing tally, having finished only 4 of the season's 8 races so far. Sebastian Vettel had retired on lap 6 with a brake failure, and the Tifosi's hopes were finally and cruelly dashed when his teammate, Charles Leclerc, went off in a nasty crash when he lost the back end going through Parabolica on lap 25 and smashed into the tyre barrier. The damaged tyre barrier needed replacing, and so the race was red flagged. Max Verstappen had an absolute shocker of a weekend. He qualified 5th in the Red Bull, and a poor start dropped him back to 8th, and he was stuck behind a pack of cars in a DRS train. A badly made pit stop saw him drop out of the top 10 under the safety car before an unspecified mechanical issue caused his retirement, completing a horrific race weekend out of the points for the Red Bull team. I think it's safe to say that the Italian Grand Prix was the best race of the 2020 season so far. While the red flag and safety car did dull the proceedings a bit, the fights in the final laps and unexpected podium finishes was certainly better than another Mercedes 1-2. Looks like Lewis Hamilton might have to wait a little longer to beat Michael Schumacher's 91 victory record, although with 3 races to win and only 7 races left in the season, I think it's a safe bet to make. As you can tell, I don't usually do these podcast things or race reviews in general, but I was so hyped up by today's dramatic race that I ended up writing about 1,000 words before I realised I'd never edit this in time as a normal video. Thankfully, a few good bits of advice from a few good friends recommended making one of these podcast things. Hope you liked it, and thank you very much for listening. I'm Jeb, and this was my 2020 Italian Grand Prix race review.